Well, good afternoon. Thank you all for coming to this session this afternoon. Hope you're having a good Cisco Live so far. The session this afternoon is going to be about sustainability data. And just before we get started, I want to tell you a little anecdote about this last weekend. So on Saturday, I received a text message from my daughter, and maybe many of you received one like this, a long text message. She's just finished her exams, and in it, it had all of the results for all the different exams she had, what percentage she scored, the grade she got. And I think at a very early age, we get to start thinking about data. And she's already thinking about, I did well here, I didn't do so well here, and I need to do better in these things. Now, as you go around Cisco Live, a lot of the different booths, they have dashboards. We see data everywhere. And in some places, that data is really mature, and we're really good at measuring it. And in the area of sustainability, there are places where the data we look at is very mature. We know from records that last year was the hottest year on record. But then you come down to sustainability in the corporate environment and sustainability in the IT department, and things are a lot less mature. So I'm delighted over the next 30 minutes. We've got a couple of experts on stage with me here. We have Mary Durasaki, who's the Chief Sustainability Officer from Cisco. She'll help us unpick the landscape of corporate data. And then we've got Vibran van der Sey from ABN AMRO. He's a sustainability IT expert, so he'll help us work out what's important for the IT department. Now, this area of sustainability data, there are just so many people now who are interested in this. So as we go through the conversation, we'll talk about some of those stakeholders. The people outside the company who are interested in this, from the regulators, the raters, the rankers, there's media, there's analysts, there's lots of people outside of our companies who are interested in the data. And there's a lot of people inside of our companies as well. People who've heard the net zero goal, and they're trying to work out what their part of that they need to do. And this sustainability data is pretty broad. Some of this is data that we've been used to having for a long time, things like supply chain, product information, logistics, but maybe it's the way we treat it and the calculations we do on top of that which are different. Some of the data is new, and it might have been collected in the past with manual processes like spreadsheets, and we're trying to automate some of that and get it to be more regulated and actually into databases where we have good control of that. And some of that may be new third-party data which we're trying to collect. So it's a complicated topic, and it's definitely an evolving story. And with that, we'll start the panel discussion. So Mary, Vibran, thank you so much for coming here today. Maybe we'll start off with some introductions. Mary, do you want to tell us a little about yourself and your role?
Wonderful, thank you all for being here. As Colin mentioned, Mary Durasaki, Cisco's Chief Sustainability Officer. So how do we help Cisco not only reach our net zero goal, embed circularity, but help many of you, our customers and our partners, also reach your sustainability goals?
And Vibran.
Yeah, nice to be here, Colin. So I work on the sustainability of IT within the CIO office of ABN AMRO Bank. So where we drive transparency, but where we also help to set targets and policies around sustainability of IT delivery.
And Vibran, maybe starting with you, it's still unusual to have somebody in IT who's focused on sustainability. Do you want to tell us a little bit about how you got into that role? Why sustainability?
Yeah, you started with an anecdote, so I'll do the same a little bit here. So it was a couple of years ago, I think 5-6 years ago, where I visited a friend of mine in London, and he's an architect, not an IT architect, there will be plenty of them around here, but he builds buildings, right? So he designs buildings, I should say. And we were walking in London, and we came across this building he helped design, and I asked him, well, what kind of criteria do you have to work with? And he came up with a lot of criteria, but a lot of criteria also were hovering around sustainability. So well, how much energy is used, what kind of insulation, where do the materials come from, and accessibility of the buildings. So I said, well, actually, if we solution for IT, we don't take that many of those criteria into account at all, right? So we're looking at performance or cost, or maybe a vendor relationship. But so that made me think about why not. So I think sustainability should be part of the practice, of every sector nowadays. So that's kind of where our route and our journey started on the sustainability within IT and of IT.
So let's hope there's more of you in the future, but do you want to just tell us a little bit about the data which you look after and about how you've managed to get the funding and the support to go after this?
Yeah, so at first I kind of got a few hours per week to work on the topic because it's kind of a off-topic subject. But then I slowly started to show how big the footprint was of IT and how that related to the other footprints of the bank. And that was actually quite significant or even material in terms of the overall footprint of the bank. IT was a majority of that. So you're showing, let's say, materiality, and that raises interest. And that also gave us some sponsorship on C-level to work on some additional insights, gathering more data, gathering further insights, and trying to pin it down to a more application level and more granular level. But that proved quite a challenge over the years to come, or the past years since. Yeah.
And I think that's very true. For a lot of companies, it is the size of the IT which then helps to bring it into focus. And as you say, for a bank, the IT is actually quite a large part of your overall carbon footprint.
We are very IT heavy, so yeah, that may be different for other companies, but typically banks and in the financial sector, it's all about IT, right? So if you want to green your own operations, you're actually talking about greening your IT.
Yep. So Mary, turning to you, in the CSO department, so what are the conversations which you have with executives inside the company and with business partners? How do you use data?
You know, I guess I always think about it as like, how do we provide clarity, get commitments, but also really foster trust? Like, think about sustainability. It often brings up a new language. Not everyone speaks scopes. What is scope 1 and 2, 3? How do you translate energy into that carbon footprint? So I think really helping people understand their current environment, their aspiration. And to get to that aspiration, for example, at Cisco, to be net zero across our value chain by 2040, you need to make commitments. So how do you actually use the data to understand where you are? What are those scenarios, those assumptions that will allow you to reach some of these sustainability goals? But to me, it's all about trust. So many of you are technology leaders, and when Cisco develops a product or create a service, there's so much trust that you have in us that what we say is real. And when I think about sustainability, we've got to use that same capability, that same thinking around what is a sustainability claim. So it's all underpinned, quite frankly, with governance. Making sure that whatever we say is not just verifiable by that subject matter expert, by that engineer or that sales representative, but also by our own team and legal and finance. And the reason for that is because a lot of what we now talk about in the sustainability space, it's not just voluntary where we choose to produce information so you understand what we're doing. It's becoming more integrated into financial reporting as well. So ensuring that what we say, we can back it up, it can be audited is critical.
And we probably do make it more complicated at times than we need to. So that clarity is really important, and helping other people to see into the data. And obviously here at Cisco Live, like so many places now, AI is a big theme. So with AI and with the energy consumption which we're seeing with AI, what's that changing in terms of the dialogue and the conversations which you're having?
You know, I was thinking about this today, and I, you know, the kind of the phrase that came to mind was both sides now. Was anyone born when Joni Mitchell was writing the song Both Sides Now? Like, I've looked at love from both sides now. And I'm like, love, AI. But there are two sides, right? There's the possibility that generative AI can solve some of the biggest issues, whether healthcare or sustainability, give us such early warning information that might help us save our community or people based on some severe weather. But we do know it requires a lot of energy. We're not sure where it's really going to impact, but we're pretty sure in the data center it's going to have a profound impact in terms of providing some interesting compute and information, but how then do we manage the energy consumption? And I think this is where understanding where we are, this is where the data comes into play. So as we even grapple with how we're going to hit net zero by 2040, being able to create scenarios, understanding what we believe our energy efficiency is going to look like, generation over generation. What do we think adoption? What do we think the shift is from hardware on-prem to maybe as a service? Being able to pull that in, one of the most important things for us as a company to hit net zero is going to be, quote unquote, greening of the grid. So how do you pull all that data together to allow us to make the right investment choices? So, I do think this is an area where we need to mindfully plan. When I think about responsible AI, it's not just fairness and privacy and accountability, transparency, but doing it in a way that is sustainable as well, making sure that there's energy to deliver not only for us in our homes, but everywhere we live, work, and create.
And Vibren, I'm sure in ABN AMRO you've got the same conversations. You've probably got somebody like Mary who's coming to you and going, all this AI stuff, are you measuring it? What are you seeing? So are you able to start to measure what you're seeing from the IT side?
Yeah, we've got our own first AI use cases. Obviously, everybody has, also our organization. But then we also have that challenge of making the impact of AI usage transparent. And I would say, again, that's where we have a data challenge, a metadata challenge. So every time you use a large language model, if we take that as an example for Gen AI, you ideally also would want to know, well, for this amount of tokens or for this conversation, what was actually the amount of energy used or the carbon that was emitted due to that usage? And I think this is again where we do get the technology, but we don't get enough data to be able to assess the impact and make the good trade-off or conscious decisions about, well, was it worth it? Was it worth, let's say, all the impact for this use case or this usage of AI? And so I think this is again a challenge to get fast and accurate metrics, either kilowatt hours or carbon, from the usage of this technology. And then we can assess if we are using it at the right moments, in the right way, for the right purposes, right? And so we need that data to do our impact assessment and to use it in a proper way. Yeah.
So Mary, the challenges that Vibren's going through, I know these are ones we've had inside of Cisco as well. And from the Chief Sustainability Office, you've been looking at how do we get better data to report externally, to use for decisions internally, and there's been this journey to build out this data foundation. Now to do that, you need to get data in. How are you going about getting this initiative going, getting the data from this big ecosystem of people inside a company and outside?
It kind of goes back to just even the title. It's pretty much the why. Why do you need this data? What is it going to do for me? So really taking a use case approach, we've seen that very valuable. I think it's really important even having conversations amongst ourselves about what would be valuable to you. I think that conversation is critical. So use case, I do think it's critical here as well to understand capability. When we first started down this path, colleagues in supply chain, very knowledgeable people in terms of how they were embedding circularity or how they were shipping products, how to create a flexible supply chain. But they were keeping that data sometimes on spreadsheets, right? So I think one of the biggest things here is how do you build the capability of the folks within your system, within your value chain, so that they understand not only what you're looking for, how do you create a corporate-wide strategy? I think a critical part is just what do we call things, that taxonomy, but underpinned by the use cases.
Yeah, this idea of being use case driven is something I'll talk a little bit more about. I've got a session on Wednesday going into more detail about this Sustainability Data Foundation. And because we were use case driven, it ended up taking us to trying to get some data which we wouldn't have got if we would just focus on sustainability data. Vibren, on your side, what were the challenges that you had? So what was the data you went after for your own purposes inside of IT, and what were some of the challenges to try to get hold of that data?
I'll take you to a few major steps that we did over the last couple of years. So 5 years ago, we started on a, let's say, once a year life cycle analysis of our complete estate. Out of the 6 categories we defined for IT, so digital workplace, our own data centers, public cloud, so somebody else's data centers, SaaS, also somebody else's data centers, and then typically commute and travel. So those were the 6 categories we started to put a footprint upon. We did that once a year based on lifecycle analysis, including scope 1, 2, and 3 of the GHG protocol. But it was an approximation, right? You use a proxy approach. You don't take exactly your laptops that you are having in your CMDB, but you take a laptop and you kind of approximate your total footprint. And then we said, well, we don't want to do this on an annual basis. We want to do this in a more real-time or near real-time fashion. So we started to create our own dashboard and looking into the different, let's say, IT assets and IT services that we get delivered and trying to bring that into the dashboard in a near real-time fashion. So we can get, and also assigning it and allocating it to the actual departments or applications within our landscape. So we can really allocate it to the right person or group or product owner, if you wish, or DevOps team. So they know how much energy they are using, how much carbon they are emitting, or how much resources they are using, if I put it more abstract. So I think that was an important next step.
Yeah. You know, if I add one of the things, like we talked about almost the use case as the pull, right? We're going to provide this information to you that's going to add an insight or help you take action. One of the other things that I would just recommend people is to really partner very closely with your finance organization. Because as sustainability data gets incorporated into your financial reporting, just like our revenue and other things, they're a critical stakeholder. And they can help you with the governance and explain also, right, the risk side of not having kind of the framework, the controls. Because not only will we report this, but there's a growing requirement that this data has to be audited by a third party, often by that third party that's auditing your financial system as well. So it's almost like use the use cases to really create that value proposition, and you can kind of enforce it a bit with your colleagues in finance.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So like Vibra and I started life in IT, and when I was in IT, I got interested in sustainability, and before I moved across to the sustainability office. And when I was in IT, like yourself, I was looking at different departments and which ones had the biggest footprint. And in my case, the open door was the data center team. They were really hungry. They had large data centers. They knew the energy consumption was something that was a big focus. So I found a different door. You found digital workplace. But now, as you say, Mary, the open door may well be outside of IT. It might be finance and other groups who are encouraging IT that they need to go and look and do some work.
Yeah, and another area that, for those of you that don't live in the sustainability kind of carbon footprint space, and it basically creates what are you responsible for across your entire value chain? But what it does is it creates interdependency between all of us. For any one of us to reach net zero, we almost have to go together. So I'll tell you another group that is often encouraging us very strongly is our customers themselves, saying, as part of the procurement contract, we need to see goals, we need to see your progress. So it's just one of the beauties of carbon accounting.
Yeah, which nicely takes us on to, so what do you see next for sustainability data? So as you say, customers are asking for things, regulators are asking things. What is the next big thing for sustainability data? I
do think, we always try to go like, what's the regulatory environment right now? We use the word, it's dynamic, which means it's changing all the time. But what we can predict is there are going to be more requirements for us to report our sustainability data. And it's going to grow, whether it's at the country level, whether it's at the state level, it is growing. It's at least a market access. But it's also critical to demonstrate leadership. This is another big area where there are these organizations, I call them raters and rankers. These are external organizations that ask you for information and then can assess how you're doing. Are you leading? A good example is EcoVadis, one that a lot of our customers ask us, where and how do we rank within that? Another is an organization called CDP. It used to be called the carbon disclosure project. And for example, we just so excited to share that we once again received an A rating. Not everyone gets that, but what that should signal to you is an external third party has looked at what we're doing, looked at our progress, and validated that. So I do think you're going to see more requirements around reporting, more requirements that there are financial controls around that, more requirements to publicly share it, and be audited as well.
And Vibran, are you seeing the same? Are you seeing you want to get more sustainability data, and what's next for you? Is it the reporting side of things, or regulations, or are there other things which are driving your interest inside of ABN AMRO?
I think reporting is becoming much more important than it was over a couple of years ago. So you see the CSRD and the ESRS reporting framework around that. That is not only energy and carbon, the climate ESRS 1, but it's also now the ESRS 5, for example, more the circularity or circular economy. So also we're going to be asking for more information on the bill of materials. So a lot of IT assets we are using, of course, there's a lot of materials being used. So where do they come from? How are they processed or mined? What are also maybe the conditions in that supply chain? Something we need to know for our CSDDD, triple D legislation. So we need to get much more metadata on everything we do from a sustainability angle to report, or maybe also to keep the cost down indeed, because some of these things will be cost driven. If we get carbon tax or whatever, we will have to put that on top of our cost base.
You know, another thing that is interesting in this space, like a lot of us, when you look at your corporate strategy, it's usually like 2 to 3 years. But when you think about sustainability, we actually have to create strategies that are 10, 15, 20 years long. So part of this is how do we make assumptions and build out scenarios? Colin, which I know you spent a lot of time on, is how do we model out a set of assumptions and scenarios that allows us to, once again, talk to some of our friends, let's say in finance, to go, you know what? There's a cost of inaction. There's a cost in not doing something. Or if we invest now, it's going to really help us in the future. But that's another critical area.
I think you're so right. I mean, I love there's a phrase that Gartner used, which I've picked up and used many times, which is we use the data for hindsight, insight, and foresight. Yeah. If you're just using it for hindsight, you're missing a big opportunity. The hindsight is great for reporting, but then you need to use the data as well to get the insight. Where is my big areas of the carbon footprint? What else should I worry about? As you say, it might be water and other things which I care about. So the insight's important as well, but then as you say, looking into the future and doing that modeling, trying to work out, we know our company has this goal, this net zero goal. Are we on track to do that? What's the greening of the grid going to take us to? What are the other actions we're going to do? Are they going to make us go faster or slower? And I think that's something you can do at a corporate level, but it's also something you can do within the IT department as well. And it sounds like when you first started working with Digital Workplace, that was what they wanted to do. They started to understand, this is my footprint, what can we do to actually reduce it?
Yeah, they were one of the first IT units to really jump on board and to see where they could help and they could improve to reduce their footprint. Of course, we purchase a lot of end-user devices, so can we do that a little bit less every year? So maybe not purchase 5,000 laptops a year, but 4,000 or 3,000 and use them for a longer period of time, diluting the carbon footprint and also having a financial impact because of that, positive impact. But on the other hand, we still need more data, like I talked about earlier on, like kilowatt hours and location-based carbon, to make sure that the tactics we apply really make sense. So if you work everything back to zero in market-based accounting, some tactics don't make sense anymore because they are all about carbon avoidance. But if you work it back to zero in RECs and PPAs and offsetting, those tactics don't make sense. So whereas I think they do, but you have to make accounting for location-based carbon and steer on your kilowatt hours. So I wanted to put that as an important aspect also.
So Vibran, for the audience here, some of them may have started their own journeys and some may not yet. what would you say should be the next steps? If they go back tomorrow, and if they have some influence or some chance to do something, even in their small part of IT, what would you say they should do next? Where's the first place to focus?
Yeah, start collecting data, start showing how material IT is in your total operations, and then make sure you go for, let's say, not only market-based, but also kilowatt hours and location-based, like I just mentioned. And next would be indeed the footprint stemming from AI or from circularity. And then assigning it to your individual workload, so you can also go to the individual teams and product owners or businesses behind that to talk about that. Well, we see you as a big steep riser in our landscape, or you're one of our biggest polluters, if you wish, in our landscape. So what can we do about that? It's an open conversation to see what kind of tactics you can apply to lower that. And so make that a data-driven discussion with those teams, because I think a lot of people in tech are really data-driven and want to see the facts and figures before they kind of buy in on the roadmap, on the road ahead.
Yeah, data-driven, and as you say, business case-driven as well. So to try to turn that data into, this is a good thing to do because it's good for the planet, but it's also, by the way, it's going to save you money in your department. Yeah. That really helps, doesn't it?
Definitely, yeah.
Mary, for you, so what are the takeaways? What are the next steps that people should think about?
Well, I think hopefully you all as technology leaders, right, recognize how transformative, how impactful, how critical technology is to create our current experience, but it's there to also create the future that we want. So I think one of it is bringing back this knowledge about how strategic, how critical technology is to create an inclusive future. I think one of the other things, again, that I grapple with is what will the technology look like in 10 or 15 years? And so whether it's where and how we're going to have IoT devices out there in the environment, and what information will that provide us, whether early warning for severe weather or more interesting information that we'll be able to do, like precision irrigation as we grapple with scarcity of water. I think continue to innovate. We need more forms of energy. On Thursday, we're going to have a really interesting conversation with one of a organization Cisco has invested in, Core Power Ocean, which imagine a buoy out there on the ocean. And it's, those waves, they keep going, and it's generating energy. Now you've got it connected. We need more forms of energy. We need to think about how technology can create that future. So not enough, I think, investment in new startups. There's not enough kind of patient capital in some of these spaces that we're going to need in 10 or 15 years.
Great. Mary Vibren, thank you so much. So I hope this has been useful. This topic of sustainability data is just going to get bigger, and we're going to need more people with this expertise. When I met Vibren first, he's kind of unusual. There aren't many people yet who do this full time in IT organizations. But there is an increasing amount of information out there which you can use to learn. There's organizations who are focusing on IT sustainability, and here at Cisco Live, we have a track this year for IT sustainability. So along with this session, there's a lot of other sessions across Cisco Live where we'll be going into various different areas, looking at AI and sustainability, looking at data center design. And on the sustainability zone, there's demos of a number of different products which are there, looking at how you can manage your energy more and how you can help to get that data out. So with that, I wanted to say a big thank you to everybody who's here. I hope this has sparked some interest, and we look forward to seeing you later in Cisco Live at one of these sessions or over at the sustainability zone. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.